What's up, guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast, brought to you by the good guys over at Fantasy Degens. As always, Sean Mitchell here as your host at smitchell17 on twitter.com. Little story time with Mitch here. So woke up a little late this morning. I actually fell asleep, forgot to set my alarm last night. Luckily, Mrs. Mitch was getting up this morning for work, and I was able to get up to go to work as well. But by the time I got up, it was time to go to work, or get ready for work, I should say. So, guess what's going to happen? We're going to wing this little thing. We're going to wing the pod. We're going to talk about the games. We're going to go over to DraftKings. We're going to look through the positions. I'm going to look and try to give you 3 or 4 of the best plays that I can find without, having a computer, without having all my resources that I typically use for my research purposes. Nonetheless, still want to talk a little bit about the plays, talk a little bit about the slate, just to get you guys some information to get you ready to build some lineups tonight on this 9-game slate. So, before we get into the DraftKings position by position, let's run down the games real quick. So we have the Hornets going into Cleveland, taking on the Cavs. We have Cleveland minus 3.5 here at home, 213. Teams are running with basically snail pace, so obviously a low total on that is warranted. Toronto going into Detroit to take on the Pistons. We have the Raptors minus 4.5 here on the road in Detroit. Of course, there's no total on this game. We're waiting to see the news with Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond with the avocado shit or whatever's going on. Got his all juiced eyeball up and everything. So, waiting on that news. Don't have a total on that one. That's an interesting game. We know that Toronto runs with a little bit of pace. Detroit, not so much. But it is interesting. So, moving on, we have Heat going into the Philadelphia to play the 76ers. Get Jimmy Butler's return to Philadelphia once again. Philadelphia comes in here as a home favorite of 7.5 points. We get a 211 on the total. Pretty low total in this one. Both teams have been running kind of mid-pack to the latter part in terms of pace. We know that as well. Next game, we have Bulls going into Washington to take on the Wizards. This will obviously be a game that we will definitely be looking to game stack. A lot of good play in this one. A lot of value plays, I think, on the Bulls side as well. Obviously, Wizards don't play a lot of defense. So this one's going to be a good game to look at, obviously. And we have Chicago minus 1.5 here on the road in Washington. And we have a 230 total. So far, highest on the board. Next game, Pelicans at the Timberwolves. Another game that should have lots and lots of pace. Minnesota is 8.5 point home favorite in this one. The Pelicans have not been that great. We get the Pelicans here on a back-to-back. Against another team that runs with a lot of pace in the Timberwolves. So we got another good matchup here with a lot of good pace. So this, obviously, there's no total on this one. We're kind of waiting to see, I guess, who's going to play for the Pelicans. Maybe if Derek Favors is going to play on a back-to-back. A few other things that we're going to have to watch for there. So that's a decent game. We'll want to see the total. We'll want to see more into that one. Going into the next game, we have the Grizzly at the Thunder. We have OKC minus 6.5 here on the road. At home. Taking on the Grizzlies, we have a total of 218. Not just a majorly big total, but one that's definitely not bad as well. All right, so moving on. Now we have 3 more games left on the slate. After Memphis and the Thunder going with Magic going into the altitude, going into Mile High, going over there in Denver to play the Nuggets. We have a 10-point home favorite here for the Nuggets. 203 on the total. Both of these teams are about the worst of the worst you can get in terms of pace. This game, obviously, I could totally see it with Orlando on a back-to-back. I could totally see fading this game all in all. Low total, it's going to be a grind game. Denver really slows down the game as more than any other team in the league almost, and Orlando is not very far behind. So it's not a really good game for fantasy purposes. And I'm honestly, like I said, I might be just to mark that game off and just move on to the next one. So next one being said, Celtics going into Dallas to take on the Luka Doncic-less Dallas Mavericks. We have Boston minus 1.5 here on the road, 216 on the total. Obviously, it's going to open up some more usage for a lot of guys on the Mavericks. Luka was, averaging over 31% usage rate in most of his games, sometime 35 or more. So lots of usage to go around. Last game, I was all over Kristaps Porzingis. He beasted and went for 53.5 fantasy points. His usage rate is over 33% without Luka on the floor. Need I remind you guys? So, again, if you want to play Kristaps, I probably will be. And then the final game on the slate, being that late night hammer with the Golden State Warriors going into Portland to take on the Blazers. This one should obviously have a nice pace. The Blazers running with decent pace lately, running with it all season. 228 on that total. We have the Trailblazers here as a 9.5 or 10-point home favorite. So a couple big favorites on the slate, but we also have a couple big totals. Portland, Golden State at 228. You also have the Pelicans at the Timberwolves, who will probably likely have a nice total. And then, of course, we also have the Bulls and the Wizards, who have the highest total at 230 right now. So those are probably the three games that we're going to look at the most. Going into DraftKings, we're going to go over to the point guard spot. We're going to talk about a few plays. So, top spot, obviously, is going to be Dame Lillard at 9K at home against Golden State. This is a massively good spot for him here at home. We know Golden State has struggled against the point guard spot now since they've returned D'Angelo Russell. That's even better for opposing point guards because he plays zero defense at all. Dame's been good. I mean, he's been putting up over 35 fantasy points in his last 6 games. In his last 3 at home, 45, 42, and 49 fantasy points with a 51-pointer behind that. So, of course, he's averaging 41 or more in his last 5 games at home. This is a massively good spot for Dame Lillard at 9K. I don't mind the price. I don't mind the play at all. He is literally probably the top point guard spot because Luka is out. Steph Curry, of course, is still up here at the top, being out. The next one we have is Ben Simmons, and as I look, I think a spot that we can look at again is I don't think a lot of people are going to be on Devontae Graham after the Charlotte, play on a back-to-back here, but he's getting a really good matchup. We've seen a lot of teams, torch the Cleveland Cavs at home. And here we got Charlotte coming on a back-to-back. Nobody's probably going to play the Hornets, which is probably going to be a good thing because I think that they can be really a contrarian, sneaky stack here. Graham still had a pretty good game last night. He put up 35.5 points at home against the Kings. He's now put up 33 or more in his last 6, actually his last 9. Devontae Graham's been averaging really good amounts of fantasy points. He's been really consistent. Like I said, he's playing well over 33 minutes a game. He's played 34 or more in his last 12. So, of course, he's solidified his role as the starting point guard, took it over from Terry Rozier, made Terry Rozier go to the shooting guard spot and said, hey, this is my team now. I'm the captain. So, I really like the spot. He's under a smidge under 8K, so his price is still up there. But for the minutes that he's getting and the production that he's, putting out, gets a great matchup tonight with Cleveland. So Devontae Graham's probably going to take my second spot. Of course, D'Angelo Russell on the flip side. You're going to have to stack that game. So I really like that run back with D'Angelo. I really like that pairing, of course. Dame in Portland is not very good against defending both point guard and shooting guard spots. So we know that that's going to be a massive spot. D'Angelo Russell getting back into his rhythm, taking lots of shots. He took 9 shots last game, 2 of 9 against Sacramento at home, which we would think would be a massively good spot. Most of the time it is. But he only put up 18.5 fantasy points in 27 minutes. It was a blowout. You can see that there was a 21-point game in this one against the Kings, so that could be why he didn't get as much run. Of course, I think that will be totally flipped tonight whenever they take on Portland in Portland. So D'Angelo Russell is going to take on the third spot here for my point guards at 7.8K on DraftKings. We know that he has the ability to shoot, 25, 26 times in a game. I think this is going to have to be a game that he's going to have to do that for them to win, because the point where we attack Portland is in the backcourt. We know, like I said, the shooting guard spot has been in the top 5 against opposings mostly all season. The point guard spot has been in the top 10 for a lot of the season. So that's where we're going to look to attack. D'Angelo Russell is going to take on my third spot at the point guard spot. Moving down the list a little bit, I think Chris Paul at 7.5 has been playing really well lately. Gets a great, really plus matchup here against Memphis. We know Memphis has also struggled against the point guard spot. As far as DVP goes, they've been in that list for all season long. Chris Paul has been playing really well lately. Fresh off a 61-point fantasy game against Chicago at home. Now he gets a Memphis team with even faster pace and an even worse guarding point guard, defending team. So Chris Paul at 7.5 I think has a lot of value. He's put up over 40 fantasy points in his last 3. He's put up over 35 fantasy points in his last 6. And he has a 50-pointer and a 61-pointer in his last 6 as well. So to put Chris Paul a little bit into perspective there, he's been putting up really good numbers. He's looking like the old Chris Paul, and I don't think this is the time that you want to fade him taking on the Memphis Grizzlies, the fast-paced Memphis Grizzlies at home here. So Chris Paul is going to take on my fourth spot. Let's see here. Is there anybody else in the point guard spot? Derrick Rose, obviously. If the Pistons have all these injuries that they keep piling up and these guys keep sitting, the guy that's been benefiting the most is going to be Derrick Rose. He's put up back-to-back 40-point plus fantasy efforts, 43 and 43 and a half in his last two. He's only played 27 and 29 minutes, so he's not playing over 30 minutes. His usage is monster whenever he gets in these games, of course, on that second unit. And they have nobody. Drummond usually runs with the second unit a lot. Blake takes a break most of the time, and then he kind of comes back in. So this is going to be a massive spot for Derrick Rose. Of course, if indeed Griffin and Andre sit again, that would be best case scenario as you get Derrick Rose here at 6.6K. And I mean, although it's not against a really good matchup, he gets Toronto here, and Lowry's a plus defender. He's a decent defender. So of course, best case, we would like for both Andre to sit and Griffin to sit if we're going to play Derrick Rose, but of course the price is not bad. And if they do the best case scenario, then Derrick Rose would be a pretty decent play. Moving down the list, you have Jamal Murray at home at 6.2 against Orlando. I think that's a pretty good spot. You have Dennis Schroeder, who's playing really well off the bench, continues to put up really good numbers. He's put up almost 35 fantasy points in his last 3 of 4. He's put up 34 or more in his last 4 of 6. So Dennis Schroeder's been getting it done off the bench. He gets a nice little spot here against Memphis at home, and he's been playing 30 minutes. He's played over 30 minutes in his last 7 games. So Dennis Schroeder he's really cheap priced as well. He's only 6K on the slate, so don't mind Dennis Schroeder at all. Jalen Brunson has been picking it up really well. Of course, he played 32 minutes last game. He played 34 minutes in the game before with Luka getting hurt and exiting that game. He's put up 37.5 and 38.3 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Are we starting to see the emergence of Jalen Brunson? We could very well be seeing that. It is noted that, Kemba has given up some pretty big games to opposing point guards, so Jalen at 6K is definitely worth a look. Moving on down the line, we have Jeff Teague at home against the New Orleans Pelicans, who are on a back-to-back. Jeff Teague at 5.8 I think is very interesting. He put up 36, 52 in his last 2. He's now put up 28 or more in his last 3. He's now put up 2 50-point-plus games in his last 4. So Jeff Teague's been playing really well. He gets a really, really nice matchup here in a very, very high-paced game at 5.8. Jeff Teague is on the list. He is definitely worth a look. Did Lonzo Ball? Yeah, Lonzo Ball played 35 minutes last night. Only put up 25.5 fantasy points, but if he's going to play 35 minutes, it's going to be really hard not to play him, especially at 5.4K. He was in the Value Vault article over on Fantasy Alarm. I know that, so props on that one. I think it was James who wrote that yesterday, so props to him on Lonzo Ball call, although he didn't, exactly crush it, but it was a good call. I mean, the guy played 35 minutes. He should have put up way better numbers, but that's neither here nor there. So Lonzo Ball, if you want to look that way on a back-to-back, he could very well play over 30 minutes once again. So keep that in mind. Looking down, of course, going down to we have Seth Curry, who's, picking up a lot more minutes now with Doncic out as well. So he's worth a look at 4.7. He's been playing really well. Other than that, I think that's probably about as low as I'm going to go on the point guard spot. So let's go ahead and move right on over to that shooting guard spot, where, of course, it's topped out by Brad Beal at 9.5K. Brad Beal has been getting it done as well. We know he's getting all the usage still. Just fresh off a 58.8 fantasy point game. He's now put up 56 and a half and 58.8 in his last 2. He's been balling, absolutely balling. He had really good matchups, though. He played at Memphis and then he played at Detroit, both teams who struggle against really good guards. But tonight, of course, he's playing Chicago at home. It's not a spot that I'm definitely going to look to fade him at. This should be a pretty decent spot. He's, like I said, he's back at home. We know he's going to get the usage. So Brad Beal, obviously, if you can fit him at 9.5, it's going to be kind of hard to, but you can. Jimmy Butler returning to Philadelphia, I'm not just a huge fan of. Drew Holiday in Minnesota, I'm fine with. He's 7.8. His price went back up a little bit. Drew Holiday has been playing pretty decent, as well as he also did put up another 40-plus game last night. Put up 43.3 last night against Brooklyn. Gets another good matchup again tonight here in Minnesota. He keeps getting good matchups, keeps putting up good numbers. He's put up 37 or more in his last 5, with, of course, his last 2 going over 43, put up 43.3 and 50 in his last 2. It is still Drew Holiday. He's still playing really well. Even with Lonzo playing 35 minutes, he still put up 43. Gets a good matchup here in a good spot. So if you can fit Drew Holiday, I don't mind him at all. Andrew Wiggins, of course, on the flip side is totally fine. C.J. McCollum at home against Golden State, I think, is almost going to be as smashy as you can get. It is, again, you got to pick right between Dame or C.J. because a lot of times they both don't go off. Just like last game, C.J. McCollum played 40 minutes against Phoenix on the road 2 days ago and put up 51 fantasy points. I want to say that is a game that I had him in the write-up on Monday. It was. He was my last spot in my shooting guard spot. And guess what? I didn't even play him, and he put up 51. It was a great spot. I knew it. Phoenix was without Devin Booker, which didn't really matter too much because Devin really isn't that great on defense as well. But it was a great spot, and CJ took advantage of it. So another spot here and a good spot here for CJ tonight against the Golden State Warriors at home. And he's only 6.9K. So good spot, like CJ as well. Moving down the list here, let's see here. If Van Fleet is out once again, which it looks like it likely could happen, Norman Powell will obviously be in play still there. Moving down the list, Evan Fournier is always a cash play, but he's playing in Denver, so that one's kind of rough. Let's see here. Bruce Brown Jr., I know I didn't bring him up in the point guard spot, but he's point guard, shooting guard eligible. If those two guys sit once again, he's been picking up nice usage. He's been picking up good minutes. He's playing good minutes. In his last 2, he's played 27 and 31 minutes. He put up 39 and 48 fantasy points. He is one of the main beneficiaries that has been getting a huge boost with the sitting of Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond, and nobody's playing him. He's 5.6K. Gets a pretty decent spot tonight, of course. It's not the greatest, but I'm totally fine with Bruce Brown Jr. if those two guys sit. Alex Burke is fine, of course, in Portland in that pace-up spot. We know he's continuing to see big minutes. He only played 22 last game, but it was a blowout. Before that, 30 minutes or more in his last 10 or 11. And he put up 35, 30, 41 in his last 3. So he's putting up good numbers still. And he's only 5.4K. So that's a good spot against Portland guards. Tyler Hero, of course, at Philadelphia, if you feel like going there. He's been getting good run, 35, 31 in his last 2. Fantasy points-wise, he's played 38 and 39 minutes. We know the Heat are still troubled by injury. Dragic, Winslow, they still have a few guys that are still out. So Hero has been getting a little bit extra run. Like I said, 38 and 39 minutes is pretty tough. So Hero at 5.2 is totally fine. Of course, it is in Philadelphia. Other than that, the only thing else that I see in this list is maybe a Dylan Brooks going into OKC. That's going to be probably it in the shooting guard list. Let's roll on over to the small forward list. Of course, Jimmy Butler is the highest priced. I'm probably not going to play Butler tonight because I think everybody else is going to. The revenge factor, and everybody loves a good revenge narrative. However, I think there's a lot of other spots that I want to pay up for, Brad Beal being one. So I'm probably going to look to fade Jimmy Butler, and maybe my top play will be Ben Simmons, of course, with Miami coming to town, or Brandon Ingram even. I like Brandon Ingram quite a bit as well. He had another nice game last night. Played 41 minutes last night, put up 41 fantasy points. Do we think he'll play tonight? Absolutely. And he's 8K. He's still priced just right around. He's been more of a cash play around this price, as he's, hasn't really topped 42 awful, much. But he's been right around that number for the last 10 or so games, of course, the ones he's played in. So Brandon Ingram is a pretty good play most nights. Of course, Andrew Wiggins already mentioned. Tobias Harris against Philadelphia. Tobias Harris has been really good for the last 10 or so games. He has put up 41 or more fantasy points in his last 8 of 9. So Tobias Harris, of course, he's just been playing really well. He's really cheap tonight going against Miami at home, so I don't mind him. Jaylen Brown against Dallas, I think, is a good spot. Bertans, of course, has been getting tons of run. He gets a good Chicago team at home here with a good pace, so Bertans, I think, is fine. Other than that, I'm looking at, Gordon Hayward against Dallas at 6.3, I think is fine. Luke Kennard, of course, has been getting lots of run and lots of usage bumps since, those two guys have been out as well. He's put up 30 and 38 fantasy points in his last two, played 34 and 37 minutes. So Luke Kennard at 5.8 is fine. Let's see. Nothing else is really. Tim Hardaway Jr., of course, against Boston, if you want to go there. Troy Brown Jr., he has also been getting decent amount of runs. Played 28, 31, 28, 35 minutes in his last four. Put up 23, 27, 25, and 39.3 fantasy points. So Troy Brown against Chicago is a good look as well. I think OG Anunoby, of course, he plays lots and lots of minutes every single game. He's got his floor is hard to predict because, he puts up 27 fantasy points last game, but the game before that he puts up 7.3 in 21 minutes. So he's hard to predict, but for the most part he's been consistent. He's put up 22 or more fantasy points in his last 5 of 6. He's played 35 or more minutes in his last 4 of 5. So at 5K, I think he's one of those guys that can easily get you to 30 fantasy points. He's going to play the minutes. He gets a good spot here against Detroit. So I don't mind OG. Derek Jones Jr. has been getting good run. Of course, it is against Philadelphia. However, he's played 31, 29, 28, 35, and 26, 27 minutes in his last 6. So he's getting good amount. Like I said, with Winslow out, he's getting the extra run at the small forward spot. That's a spot they've kind of struggled at. He's getting the run behind, Duncan Robinson and those guys. So, Derek Jones Jr. put up 28, 23, 33, and 25 fantasy points in his last 4. Pretty good numbers. Not bad for a guy that's only 4.6. It is in Philadelphia, as I mentioned, so it's not the greatest spot, but I don't exactly mind it. Dorian Finney-Smith put up 30 fantasy points last game against Milwaukee. Is he going to see a little bit of a usage bump? I'm probably going to say so. That's one to keep in mind. Let's roll over to the power forward spot, get this thing wrapped up. Pascal Siakam, of course, against Detroit. If they, have these guys sit, he's going to be in a smash spot. As I said, Kristaps Porzingis should be in another good spot tonight against Boston. They don't exactly have anybody that can really, match up with him defensively. So I think Kristaps is in a good spot as well. Let's see here. Kevin Love against Charlotte should be a smash spot as well. We know Charlotte has struggled very, very mightily against bigs. Kevin Love playing at home at 6.8, I think is a really, really fair price yet. Jaren Jackson in OKC, I think is fine. You have Carmelo Anthony at home taking on Golden State, I think is fine. Let's see here. Al Horford against Miami is not the greatest spot. Aaron Gordon in Denver is a sneaky one, and he's only 6K. I don't think I mind it if you want to go there. More tournament play for sure. Lauri Markkanen in Washington at 5.9. Wish he would get back to his old ways. Markieff Morris had his price raised quite a bit, almost over 1,000, simply due to, Blake Griffin sitting. He's played 33 minutes in his last 2. He's put up 29 and 33.8. So Markieff Morris, of course, is benefiting from Blake Griffin being out, but he did have his price raised. Of course, Christian Wood in the same essence. He played 28 minutes last game, put up 24 fantasy points. Played 22 minutes the game before, put up 31 fantasy points. So Christian Wood, of course, if both of those guys sit, should see some extra run there as well. Let's see here. Serge Ibaka I wanted to bring up, but he hadn't really played. He's played 21 minutes only once in his last 4. He's only went over 20 minutes once in his last 5. But he's still putting up really good fantasy numbers. He put up 22.8 last game, 37.5 the game before, 31 and 24.8. So he's put up 24 or 23 or more in his last 4 or 5, which is really good. So don't mind him there at all if you want to play him against Detroit, who's struggling, and they're, of course, they're depleted in their front court. They're hurt. They got a lot of injuries. We'll have to wait and see that news. So Baca, I'm totally fine with. Rolling down, that's about it in the power forward list. Let's wrap this thing up with the center spot. Karl Anthony Towns against New Orleans, obviously just put up 64 last game. He's now put up 60 or more in the last 2 of 3, 58 or more in his last 3 of 5. Karl Anthony Towns continues to get it done. We know he's a great play. Joel Embiid at home. I don't know if I'll play him against Bam. Although he has put up 49 and 50.3 in his last 2 at home. We will be watching out for Drummond. It looks like the reports are saying that he is expected to play, so that's obviously one we're going to look at against Marc Gasol there. Nikola Jokic at home in Denver put up 50, 70, 44.8, and 35 in his last 4 at home. Gets Magic on the back-to-back here. Not sure how much the Magic will be able to hang here in Denver. That's the only thing that has me worried, but, I mean, it's a really good spot for Jokic. Hassan Whiteside, we know Golden State has struggled against the center spot. In Hassan's last 5 games at home, he's put up 49.8, 42, 41.5, 59, 51, and 44. So that was his last 6 games at home, and he's averaging over 40 fantasy points. So Hassan Whiteside, this is an easily smash spot here at 8.5. Really like him at home against Portland, or against the Warriors, moving down the list, that's, Steven Adams at home against Memphis is fine. On the flip side, if you want to play Jonas Valanciunas, he put up 41 last game against Miami at home. I don't mind him as well, and he's really cheap at 6.3 if you want to go there. Tristan Thompson at home against the Charlotte. We know they struggle against bigs. It's a good spot for him. He's played 32 and 27 minutes in his last 2. He's put up 30 and 32 fantasy points in those 2. So good spot there for Tristan Thompson at home as well. Other than that, that's probably about as far as I'm going to go down here in the center spot list. Mahinmi against against Chicago, He played 25 minutes last game, but he only put up 20 fantasy points. Not really what we want. Yeah, that's it. All right, guys. So, again, I had to wing this. It's 26 minutes, so I still stayed under my 30-minute threshold. Pretty happy about that. I do apologize for not being a little bit more organized and prepared this morning. Hopefully you guys get all the information that you needed out of this pod. Of course, we will be in the Fantasy Sports Legends Slack chat most of the day, chatting over plays, talking about the slate. If you're not a member, ask us how you can get in. Just DM me or KC Bubba at KC Bubba on Twitter. Enjoy your Wednesday.